One of the main reasons people hate anime is because of its trash dialogue, and they say this indirectly through the repetitive and generic lines you hear an average anime hater saying. Now, there's a lot of factors to consider when talking about the problems in anime dialogue, but these anime in particular perfectly represent the 6 aspects of how not to write dialogue by poorly executing purpose, filter, and style, which make dialogue both compelling and entertaining, or at the very least coherent. The first being Demon Slayer's boring conflicts.
みっともねえな、みっともねえな、お前ら本当にみっともねえな、やっぱりそうか、みっともねえな、お前。鬼の妹よりも弱いのは当然だが、それにしてもみっともねえ。
Because I know you weebs will be torching my comment section trying to defend your favorite anime, I want to clarify that dialogue is basically the conversations between characters in a story, but it's one of the most essential parts of storytelling as it helps to move a plot forward through how characters express thoughts and emotions, foster relationships, and exchange information. In Demon Slayer, most of the conflicts between its characters are surface level and one-dimensional. Conflicts don't necessarily mean characters talking should always directly oppose one another, just that from your characters' identities, they should want different things within the story. The characters in Demon Slayer are not compelling, and people only watch this anime for its animation and fights, as its characters' interactions lack the depth and intensity to keep people invested in them. This makes the conflict between these characters feel shallow and repetitive, as none of the demons who Demon Slayer's characters face, nor the people they fight alongside, have affected each other's worldview or made themselves question their reason for it. Good dialogue has deep ideological conflicts which are created and influenced by its characters, views, and beliefs. An anime that does this well is Attack on Titan.
忘れたのか？何をしにここに来たのか？犬に食われた妹に報いるためだろう。復権派の仲間に、ダイナに、クルーガーに報いるために。
Attack on Titan executes conflicts between its characters and their ideologies well enough to make it difficult for us to take sides when its dialogue appropriately expresses and reveals that these characters, including the antagonists, have very valid stances and worldviews. Now, Hunter x Hunter and Uzumaki's dreadful exposition is the second aspect under the purpose of a story's dialogue, which these anime fail at completely.
どうしてぴったり繋がったの？渦巻き型に増築されることを予想してたみたいに。
逆にこうは考えられないか。長屋自体が昔は渦を巻いていたと。それが長い年月の間に徐々に朽ちて、わずかな名残があちこちに残っていたのだと。今のこの町は昔の町の再現なのだと。
Effective exposition feels seamlessly integrated into the story, while ineffective exposition may overwhelm or bore the audience before they can get to the meat of the story. Now, there's a lot of hate on the disgusting downfall of Uzumaki's animation, but its pacing also spiraled out of control along with it. I love the first episode's storytelling. Our protagonist discussing the increasing odd spiral-related events happening in the town, the reasonable story progression as we begin to understand Saito's increasingly voiced out concerns are from his father's new weird obsession with spirals. But after that episode, it all starts going to shit. Random series of events start happening at an unusual pace, and instead of properly feeding our curiosity with reasonable exposition, Saito just suddenly starts voicing out his totally uncalled for and baseless thoughts on what the origin of the spirals could be, and it somehow ends up just being right at the end. Trying to understand the lore behind the story became unbelievably dreadful as its terrible exposition felt forced and half-baked. Hunter x Hunter.
なんて早く、なんてとこに気づきやがるんだ。
仮に後者が正解ならば、今2人が無事かどうかを確かめる術はない。万が一の場合、代わりに誰かがユピーとやらなければならない。
Hunter x Hunter is considered as one of the best shonen anime, with great characters, world, and an amazing power system, but it has a significant flaw in how it delivers exposition about them. It resorts to long-winded monologues, uncharacterized abstract narrations, in-depth explanations of a character's abilities, reasoning, decisions, and its world's politics in exhausting detail, most times literally mid-battle, and its unnecessary exposition elongates the story's pace, making it difficult to push through and ultimately killing our immersion and engagement. It's why the Chimera Ant arc, despite being the best arc, felt like it dragged on for ages. But Steins Gate, on the other hand, deserves some credit for handling its exposition with characterized intention and audience-warranted curiosity.
あれマユシーの懐中止まっちゃってる。おかしいな。さっきネジ巻いたばっかりなのに。
In Steins Gate, a character explains something within its world of time travel concepts notably and distinctly as a result of events that pique the curiosity of both its characters and us, the viewers. The purpose section of dialogue is to create authentic and engaging conversations that enhance the story, but Demon Slayer's boring conflicts and Hunter x Hunter and Uzumaki's dreadful exposition perfectly represent the opposite of this. For the filter section of dialogue, writing, however, we have Bleach's dull character dynamics.
ことはできぬ。
何を言ってんだ。冷圧の
自身の母のことさえも。
何を言ってんだって消えてんだよ。
ワンデンライ秀樹。
After establishing a character's identity, their personalities, backgrounds, and backstories should guide how their speech should be influenced. Dialogue should be able and ready to change in respect to the context of a character's development or his relationship with and perspective of other characters. But Ichigo's dialogue somehow doesn't change when he speaks with allies, enemies, or spiritual entities, ranging from his school friends to the literal protectors of heaven and the rulers of hell. His dialogue also doesn't evolve over the run of the show, despite all his experiences and extra power-ups. Though Bleach is great at establishing character identities, most if not all of its characters have stagnant dialogue with little to no development. On the good side of this is a story like Love is War.
藤原さん抜きで遊びにですか？つまり藤原さんではなく私と遊びたいということですか？あらまあ、おかわいいこと。
This fantastic rom-com anime is quite good at individualizing its characters with their unique and effective expression of their personality, relationships, and backgrounds with added humor and tension within its romantic setting. Also, Death Note.
生まれてから一度でも本当のことを言ったことがあるんですか?
Death Note's two highly observant and intellectual main characters, Light and L, constantly gauge and assess the situation around them based on side characters or each other's statements, reactions, and even their environment before making their next moves, almost making their interactions seem like intense chess matches. In the case of Tokyo Revenger's disregard for location and time, it shows just how location and time affect dialogue in a story.
頑張ることは辛くねえよ。一番辛いことは孤独なことだ。
To have cringe-ass, melodramatic dialogue, overly sentimental monologues, and emotional exchanges is not necessarily always a negative thing, but to have it within an anime that's supposed to be centered around a delinquent gang of misfits and troublemakers is rather jarring. The speech patterns of Tokyo Revenger's characters fail to depict believable roughness and grit in articulations for the time, setting, and background it's trying to depict. Its characters still manage to retain the same speech patterns patterns both in the past as kids and in the present as adults. Location serves as a dialogue filter in regards to where the characters talking currently are, where they originate from, and or the world the story is set in, like how people from New York, Jupiter, or Middle Earth would definitely speak differently, and time serves as a filter for the speech patterns of people in different time periods, as people in the year 2030 would definitely speak differently from people in 2264. A perfect example of this done well is cyberpunk edge runners.
逃げようメイ。あんたも死んじまう。
俺は逃げねえ。死神がそこまで来てるんだ。
This anime filters time and location by believably portraying the spoken dialect of a futuristic dystopian setting with a lot of new slang and jargon in their conversations. Jobless Reincarnation also does this nicely.
パウロめ何しやがる。
どうなってんだ？
こんにちは。ルーディウス・グレイロットと申します。
This anime shows different forms of communication for both worlds our protagonist has been a part of, as we observe that the way Rudeus Greyrat thinks to himself is different from the way he speaks and interacts with the people from his new world. Moving on to the most commonly failed section of dialogue I see in anime, style. We have Jojo's Bizarre Adventure's Obnoxious dialogue.
例えばこの場合わしはふっかけられているのをお見通しだよんという態度を取り
バカにしちゃいかんよ君。高い高い
と大声で笑おう。するといくらなら買うね。客に決めさせようと探ってくる。
JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, despite being an iconic and entertaining anime, has some of the worst dialogue I've seen in anime. Its characters have lengthy and incessant on-the-nose dialogue, directly dictating every single action, decision, and feeling its characters have through the show's narrator or the characters themselves, and it tries to cover up its drawn-out dialogue with completely unnecessary, exaggerated character expressions, which ultimately make its dialogue come off as unnatural and inauthentic. But in anime, a silent voice has more brief and story-relevant dialogue. The writer of this beautiful anime movie is great at using minimalized dialogue and smartly placed silences, which only enhance the richness of the story and the complex themes being communicated. Cowboy Bebop also has an adequate and coherent style of executing its dialogue, as it utilizes subliminal messaging to near perfection.
この目を見ろ。事故でなくして片っぽは作り物だ。その時から俺は片方の目で過去を見てもう一方で今を見てた。目に見えてるもんだけが現実じゃない。そう思ってた。
There's so much left unsaid for the viewer to piece together and interpret in this anime's dialogue that if you don't pay adequate attention and utilize your own deductive reasoning, you'll miss out on most of the story. The reason it works is because it doesn't contradict any established characterizations in the anime, seeing as its characters are established as people who often avoid addressing heavy or sensitive subjects and the depressing, lonely nature of their lives directly. Lastly, we have ReZero's bad flow and rhythm.
そうなる前に発散する必要がある。
お腹が爆発する前に出すか。便秘みたいなもんってこと？
言い方を考えるかしら。
ReZero is a pretty good anime with fairly entertaining and well-crafted characters, one of the best isekai out there. Despite how intense and emotionally jarring the tragic plot of this anime is, what takes away from it is the bad flow of its characters' dialogue, which affects the overall vibe, tone, and flow of its story. Good free-flowing dialogue is all about the choice of words, sentence structure, and positioning that make up characters' dialogue, allowing for fluency and cadence. cadence. The flaw in ReZero's dialogue is how this show tries to switch up from its gory tone into a comical one by using some out-of-place meta-humor, but the main issue is the fact that though it represents its characters' identities through its dialogue, it does it to the extreme, like how Beatrice always seems to randomly add "I suppose" to the end of some of her sentences, or Garfield and his random quotes whenever he talks, and of course Subaru's incessant isekai-based meta-humor. It's good to give characters distinct speech patterns, but it becomes an issue when it's too repetitive and so random and unnecessary that you can barely make out what the characters are trying to say. On the good side of this, though, is the GOAT itself, Monster.
そんな重い罪を犯した人間が立派に立ち直ったような顔をして娘さんに会うんですか。どうです？飲みませんか？
This anime's dialogue is so good that I could literally have used it as the good side of every other point I mentioned in this vid. The flow of this story's dialogue is so coherent and concise that it allows you to ease into its story. Monster's dialogue is often characterized by its psychological depth and realism. The conversations between characters are crafted to reflect complex moral dilemmas and the intricacies of human nature, and that allows for a nuanced exploration of its themes on guilt, redemption, and the nature of evil. The structure of its dialogue allows moments of silence and tension to speak volumes while heightening the emotional impact of its scenes. Each character's voice is distinct, but in a way that allows you to completely resonate with its storytelling. I just gave a full structured guide of the mistakes you should not make when writing dialogue, but here are some bonus aspects I've seen that completely ruin the quality of anime dialogue. Black Clover's stereotypical character voices. There's a lot of common stereotypes and tropes we see in anime characters. The obnoxious loudmouth who means good, the quiet dude trying to look mysterious, or the usual tsundere female characters. Black Clover characters are almost all tropes and stereotypes, and its dialogue reflects this so much that I can literally watch it on mute without subtitles and still know the general gist of what its characters are saying based on only their behavior. That's just how predictable it is, but Frieren Beyond Journey's End does this well, as it has beautifully written and original characters with dialogue that feels natural and relatable, capturing the nuances of human emotion and relationships. Characters in this anime often engage in meaningful conversations that explore themes of time, loss, and the impact of their past adventures, which make up its story. This depth adds layers to their interactions, making the dialogue resonate with its audience. I was particularly impressed by this because despite modern anime only focusing on visually appealing to the majority of the current generation's poor attention spans, it still managed to tell a story with meaningful, unique, and thought-provoking dialogue. Easily the best new-gen anime. Next bonus is Vinland Saga's unilingual dialogue. Vinland Saga is one of my favorites with some of the best dialogue I've seen in anime. Though I'm pained to place this on the wrong side of anything, it does fail to research the languages of foreigners, as is evident when we observe the distinct peoples ranging from Danish to Welsh, and also the Norse Vikings all speak Japanese in the anime, and though they attempt to let it be known that these characters aren't speaking the same language in-world, it still breaks the immersion when all we hear is Japanese. I'm yet to see any anime that actually took into account learning a different language for its dialogue, so take a look at stories like Lord of the Rings, Dune, or Game of Thrones, whose dialogue include different languages with lore surrounding the cultures that speak them, ultimately making their stories more immersive and realistic. And finally, almost every anime's unnatural interactions. Anime dialogue are often overly expository, dramatic, or repetitive, which can take away from the authenticity of character interactions. The incomprehensible sounds characters are always making, the repetitive word chanting, and unbelievable character behaviors are used in anime to try and enhance its scenes by making them more expressive, but end up coming off as over-the-top and unnatural. And that's because absolutely no one talks like that. This is even worse in the dubbed versions, as almost all dub fail to capture the original tone or intent of the characters, and heightening how awkward or forced scenes feel. There's more and more abridged anime content online, and that's honestly because of how easy it is to slap random conversations over the dialogue in anime. And despite how hilarious and out of pocket they sound, some of them are actually better than the original dialogue of the scenes. Now, whether you agree with me or not, all I have to say to you is, check out these videos to understand how anime beautifully portray themes in their stories, or how not to write a power system.